It was one of the defining battles in world history, a clash of civilizations that shaped the map of Europe as we know it today. The Siege of Vienna in 1683 wasn't just a struggle between armies. It was a historical turning point whose echoes can still be felt centuries later. This is the story of how 12,000 Polish cavalry rode into history and turned the tide of an Ottoman invasion that threatened to conquer the heart of Europe. Everything you thought you knew about Europe's survival is about to be rewritten. Our story begins in the late 17th century, a time when two mighty powers were on a collision course. On one side was the Ottoman Empire, a sprawling, seemingly unstoppable Islamic state that controlled much of Southeast Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. By this point, it had been the dominant Eurasian power for over 300 years, its armies feared, and its borders ever expanding. On the other side was the Holy Roman Empire, a fractured collection of predominantly Catholic states loosely held together under Emperor Leopold I. It was hardly a unified bloc, yet it sat in the Ottomans' path, guarding the doorway into Western Europe. Who could say if it was up to the challenge? The tensions leading up to the Siege of Vienna were decades in the making. Under Sultan Mehmed IV and his Grand Vizier, Kara Mustafa, the Ottomans aimed to extend their dominion deeper into Europe. By the 1670s and early 1680s, Ottoman diplomacy and military strategy had set its crosshairs firmly on Vienna, a strategic and symbolic prize. Whoever controlled Vienna had access to the Danube River, arguably Europe's most important artery for trade, communication, and military logistics at that time. The Holy Roman Empire, riddled with internal conflicts and encumbered by external threats, was vulnerable. It was clear that an Ottoman victory at Vienna wouldn't merely stop there. It would surely snowball, leaving much of Europe exposed to Ottoman conquest. The stakes couldn't have been higher. So, in July 1683, the Ottomans arrived at the gates of Vienna with approximately 140,000 men, including formidable janissaries who were the backbone of their military machine. On the defense were roughly 15,000 soldiers within the city walls, led by Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, a man of grit and determination who knew the odds but vowed to resist. Tunnels were dug, fortifications were bombarded, and a grinding, bloody siege ensued. Within weeks, Vienna's defenders were nearing exhaustion. Supplies dwindled, morale dropped, and the walls of the city began to weaken under relentless Ottoman artillery fire. Victory seemed almost certain for the Ottomans. And yet, high above the battlefield's chaos, a savior was closing in. Alarmed by Vienna's plight and the catastrophic implications of its fall, the Holy Roman Empire sought allies across Europe. Enter King John III Sobieski of Poland, a brilliant military strategist with a critical cavalry force known as the Winged Hussars. These elite troops, known for their speed, discipline, and dramatic feathered armor, were famed as some of the most effective cavalry units of the era. By September 1683, after weeks of urgent secretive coordination, a coalition force led by Sobieski assembled to join the battle. This was the Christian response to what was perceived as a civilizational threat, an unprecedented united effort involving Polish, Austrian, and German soldiers, numbering some 70,000 in total. On September 11th, the multinational force reached the heights of Kahlenberg Hill, looking down on Vienna, now teetering on the brink of collapse. The next morning, September 12, 1683, would turn out to be one of the most decisive dates in European history. The battle began at dawn, with the Christian forces launching a coordinated attack on the Ottoman positions. The fighting was fierce and unrelenting. Both sides knew what was at stake. The Ottomans relied on their superior numbers and siege equipment, while the defenders and their allies capitalized on sheer determination and the strength of their coalition. The climax came late in the afternoon, when Sobieski ordered his Winged Hussars into action. Roughly 12,000 cavalry, the largest cavalry charge in history, thundered down the hillside into the Ottoman lines. It was as stunning as it was devastating. The shock of the charge struck fear into the hearts of the Ottoman soldiers. Chaos erupted in the Ottoman camp as lines broke under the cavalry's overwhelming force. Kara Mustafa, watching the disaster unfold, retreated with the remnants of his army. By nightfall, it was over. Vienna had been saved, and the Ottoman dream of capturing the city was shattered. But the consequences didn't end there. In the immediate aftermath, the defeat at Vienna marked the beginning of the long decline of the Ottoman Empire. No longer could it match the unified, modernizing states of Europe. This loss also signaled the rise of the Holy Roman Empire as a reinvigorated power in European politics. Over the years, the battle would come to symbolize the turning point at which Europe decisively turned the tide against Ottoman expansion. For centuries to follow, that date, September 12, 1683, has been remembered as not just a military victory, but a cultural and civilizational one. For Poland in particular, the charge of the winged hussars became legendary, immortalized in art, literature, and folklore. To this day, Polish military traditions honor Sobieski's triumph. The battle also had cultural ramifications. The survival of Vienna ensured the continuation of Western European traditions at a critical moment in history. Scholars and historians argue that without this victory, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and other intellectual movements that would later define the modern era might have been derailed or delayed indefinitely under Ottoman influence. And how does this story echo into our contemporary world? In many ways, the Siege of Vienna forged the borders and identities of modern Europe. It has endured in memory and scholarship as a key example of multicultural coalitions overcoming insurmountable odds in the face of existential threats. So there you have it. The Battle of Vienna wasn't just about cannons and walls. It was about defending ideals, forging unlikely alliances, and rewriting the trajectory of empires. While Kara Mustafa and Sultan Mehmed IV faded into history, names like Sobieski and the Winged Hussars continue to resonate as symbols of resilience and hope. In the end of our journey today, we see that history is not just a series of dates and names, but a tapestry of choices, challenges, and triumphs that shape the world we live in. The Siege of Vienna reminds us that even in the darkest of times, a collective will and courage can turn the tide of history itself. It stands as a testament to how fragile yet powerful the human story can be, forever shaped by events like this one, where the stakes couldn't have been higher and the outcome couldn't have been more pivotal.